Usually when we talk about names, there's this expectation of absolute simplicity.
Right.
Like, think about a sticky note. You grab a neon yellow square, you write a word on it, you slap it on a moving box or, a file folder, and that's it. It's entirely one-dimensional.
Yeah, completely utilitarian.
Exactly. It's just this convenient utilitarian tag used to identify us in a crowded room.
Well, it's a system of pure function, really. I mean, you need to get someone's attention, you emit a specific sound, and they turn around.
Yeah.
We rely on that mechanic thousands of times a day without ever, stopping to question the underlying psychology of it.
But then, and this is what we're looking at today, you step into the world of trauma and memory
Mm.
and behavioral conditioning. And suddenly that simple neon sticky note feels like it has made of solid lead.
Oh, absolutely.
We are jumping into a psychological landscape today for this deep dive, where a name is no longer just a convenient tag. It actually operates as a profound trigger.
It's a fascinating shift.
Right. Because for a lot of people, simply hearing their own name called out triggers this instant, undeniable physical distress. We are talking about a sudden tightening in the chest, the feeling of the breath being knocked out of you, or, an involuntary flashback, or just this overwhelming wave of disgust that just washes over the entire body.
And that physical response is the absolute definition of a psychological collision because what is socially understood to be a completely neutral identifier,
Right, just a word.
exactly, just a word, it becomes a source of intense internalized emotional pain. And because it's invisible to everyone else in the room, it's an incredibly isolating experience for the person going through it.
And that isolation, that hidden weight, is exactly what our mission is to unpack today. We are going to explore the hidden psychological architecture attached to those syllables.
It's so necessary.
It is. Why do so many people experience genuine distress when called by the name they've had since birth? How does this link back to past environments? And I think most importantly, we are going to walk through the actual actionable mechanics for decoupling our self-worth from the names we were assigned.
So, to really understand how that decoupling works, we first have to completely dismantle the idea of what a name actually is.
Okay, dismantle it how?
Well, psychologically speaking, a name isn't just a word. Your name is a container.
A container.
Right. And from the moment you were born, that container is open. Over the course of your life, it gets filled with this constant stream of memories, conditioning, external evaluations.
So it's catching everything.
Everything.
Right.
Every time you are praised, scolded, shamed, or celebrated, a little piece of that emotional experience gets dropped right into the container of your name.
Wow, that visual of a container changes everything.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, because if we look at the visceral physical reactions people describe, like the body literally stiffening up, the stomach suddenly feeling like it's filled with rocks, or, that overwhelming magnetic urge to just drop your gaze and stare at the floor.
Shame response, yeah.
Right, the shame response. It becomes very clear that for some people, that container has been filled with something deeply toxic.
Yeah, those physical symptoms are classic markers of conditioned learning, and they often stem directly from childhood environments.
Like how so? Give me an example of how that starts.
Well, if a child grows up in a dynamic where being called by their name is frequently the immediate precursor to a scolding or punishment or some form of intense emotional distress, the brain starts connecting the dots.
It's mapping the pattern.
Exactly. The brain is, above all else, an incredibly efficient pattern recognition machine. It doesn't care about the letters or the spelling of the name. It cares about survival.
It is the classic, first name, middle name, last name, get in here right now
Yes.
dynamic. But multiplied by 1,000 over years and years until it's completely internalized into the nervous system.
That's it, exactly. If you repeatedly experience a sequence where you hear a specific auditory cue, which is your name, and then immediately experience fear or shame, your nervous system learns a very simple, very permanent equation.
Which is?
That specific sound equals danger. The sound becomes the threat itself.
Oh, man, it's so much like a conditioned reflex in a movie. The analogy that always comes to mind for me when reading the source material is this suspenseful music in a horror film.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Like those two iconic notes in Jaws.
Dun, dun, dun.
Right, dun, dun, dun. The music itself, just those sound waves vibrating through the theater speakers, cannot physically hurt you.
Right. A cello isn't dangerous.
Exactly. A cello isn't dangerous.
Yeah.
But your body physically tenses up, your heart rate spikes, your palms sweat, because that music signals that the monster is coming.
Yes.
For someone with this specific type of conditioning, their given name is the scary music.
The sound is the signal. And the physical reaction you mentioned earlier, the heavy stomach, the dropped gaze, the tight chest, that is your body bracing for the monster.
Wow.
It bracing for the emotional hit that historically always followed that sound. Your nervous system is basically trying to protect you by getting a head start on the trauma.
Oh, wait, let me push back on this a little bit because this is the part that I think confuses a lot of people, even those experiencing it themselves.
Sure.
Let's say I'm an adult. I have a mortgage. I have a career. I'm sitting in a brightly lit coffee shop on a Tuesday afternoon.
Right.
My prefrontal cortex, my rational adult brain, knows unequivocally that I am not in trouble.
Right, you're totally safe.
I haven't done anything wrong.
Yeah.
I'm safe. So if a barista calls out my name for a latte, why can't I just logic my way out of the panic? Why doesn't the adult brain just override a bad memory from childhood?
Because survival mechanisms are fundamentally designed to bypass conscious thought. They have to be.
Because it takes too long to think.
Exactly. If our ancient ancestors heard a twig snap in the woods and had to stop and logically evaluate, like, is that a predator or is it just the wind? Let me assess the probabilities. They wouldn't have survived.
You're eaten.
Right. The amygdala, which processes fear, reacts fractions of a second faster than the prefrontal cortex can process logic. So when you hear your name in that coffee shop, your body hijacks the moment.
It just takes over.
Completely.
Yeah.
It prioritizes the conditioned reflex over your current reality. By the time your logical brain says, hey, it's just a latte, your nervous system has already initiated a full-scale defensive lockdown.
Which explains why society's typical response to this is so incredibly frustrating.
Oh, it's the worst.
People who haven't experienced this invisible tripwire constantly dismiss it. You hear things like, oh, it's just a name. Everyone dislikes their name a little bit. You're overreacting.
That dismissal is arguably one of the most damaging aspects of this entire phenomenon, because the person giving that advice assumes the problem is aesthetic.
Like you just don't like how it sounds?
Exactly. They think you just don't like the vowels and consonants, or you think it sounds old-fashioned. They have absolutely no concept of the invisible avalanche of history that the sound unlocks.
It's like telling someone who is terrified and having a panic attack over the Jaws music, relax, it's just a couple of cellos playing notes on a page.
Yes.
You are entirely missing the point of what the cellos represent. You're gaslighting their nervous system.
When society tells someone they are overreacting to their own name, they are essentially telling that person that their history, their lived trauma, and their physiological reality are invalid.
And what does that do to a person?
Well, that invalidation just adds another heavy layer of shame and isolation right back into the container of their name. They start feeling broken because they can't simply get over it like everyone is telling them to.
Okay, so if just a first name can act as this massive, invisible avalanche of shame, imagine what happens when you tack on the middle and last name.
Oh boy.
That's a whole different level of exposure. When we look at the psychology of public spaces in our sources, the distress of hearing the full legal name broadcasted is off the charts.
It really is, because first names are often used in intimate or casual settings. But the full legal name, first and last, is the official record of your existence.
Right.
Hearing that in a quiet public place, like a hospital waiting room, a courtroom, or a government office, it drastically amplifies the psychological distress. It moves from a personal trigger to a public unmasking.
Oh man, the DMV is the ultimate example of this.
The absolute worst.
Just picture that sterile environment, the fluorescent lights humming. Everyone is sitting in those hard plastic chairs, perfectly quiet, just staring at their phones, avoiding eye contact, and then echoing over a crackling loudspeaker, John Robert Smith to counter 4.
Yeah.
You aren't just a person anymore, you're an announcement.
And that public broadcast creates a profound feeling of being dragged out into the open, because a full name doesn't just connect you to a scolding parent in a childhood kitchen.
What else does it connect to?
It acts as an anchor tethering you to every single institution you have ever navigated in your entire life.
You're talking about the institutional memory of who you were, the name on the permanent record.
Think about the sheer volume of bureaucratic history attached to those 2 or 3 words. Your report cards, disciplinary actions in middle school, medical records, tax forms, employment reprimands.
Wow, yeah.
Everything. Every time you were ever reduced to a file on a cold desk, that full name was stamped on it.
So when you hear it in that quiet waiting room, it's this incredibly vulnerable, forced exposure. You're just trying to renew your license or get a blood test, and suddenly you have this acute paranoia.
Exactly.
The psychological breakdowns of these moments in the deep dive sources highlight 2 very specific intrusive thoughts. First, someone who knows the old me might be here right now. And second, everyone in this room is about to judge me as the person attached to this history.
It forces the individual to wear their entire history all at once. Like, a nickname might trigger a specific memory with a specific friend. It's like carrying a single memory in your pocket.
Okay, yeah.
But your full legal name. That's like being forced to carry your entire past on your back in front of an audience of strangers. It merges any unresolved past shame with acute present-day vulnerability.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. You are sitting there trying to handle mundane adult business, and suddenly you are psychologically reduced back to the scolded child, the struggling student, and the flawed teenager, all rolled into one public echo.
That institutional weight is undeniable. But what absolutely fascinates me about this psychological dynamic, and we see this a lot of the research, is that the most complicated, confusing, and painful reactions don't always come from the DMV or a hospital loudspeaker.
No, they don't.
They often come from the people closest to us, our family.
The family dynamic is where the conditioning becomes incredibly nuanced and, frankly, deeply confusing for the person experiencing it. Because we assume that if a parent yells the name, it triggers fear.
Right.
But what happens when a parent calls out the name gently?
Exactly. This is the part that is so wild to me. Logically, you would think, okay, the yelling is the trigger. If my mom is calling me softly to come have dinner or offering me a cup of tea, it should be fine. The tone is nice.
I mean, it's not fine.
No. The reality is that even a gentle, affectionate call can cause a massive visceral reaction. People describe it as an involuntary shudder, a cold sweat, or a sudden wave of disgust. Why does a nice tone trigger a bad memory?
Because it creates a profound cognitive dissonance. When that name is spoken by a parent, even softly, it holds two massive opposing forces simultaneously.
Two forces.
Yeah. On one hand, the name holds the child's desperate, unfulfilled desire for unconditional love, the deeply human wish to be called affectionately and to feel safe in that relationship.
That makes total sense.
Right.
But on the other hand...
It holds the absolute terror of the past, the muscle memory of walking on eggshells, the exhaustion of swallowing your true feelings to appease that exact same parent, the hypervigilance of trying to predict their mood based on how they pronounce the vowels in your name.
It is almost like a corrupted file on a computer. You click play, and the file tries to play two completely different audio tracks at the exact same time.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Even if the parent is genuinely trying to be nice in the present moment, the listener is simultaneously hearing the phantom voice of the parent from 20 years ago screaming that same name. The new audio and the old audio clash.
And that clash, that contradiction, is what causes the physical shudder. Your body is literally rejecting the mixed signal. Your ears hear a gentle invitation, but your nervous system remembers a trap.
It doesn't know what to do.
Exactly. It doesn't know whether to lean in for a hug or brace for an impact, so it short-circuits into disgust.
Which has to cause an unbearable amount of guilt.
Oh, immense guilt.
Right, because if my mom calls me sweetly and I physically recoil and feel sick to my stomach, my immediate thought is going to be, what is wrong with me? I am a terrible, ungrateful person. She's just offering me tea and I'm treating her like a monster.
That guilt is arguably the heaviest part of the burden, and it is something we need to validate entirely. It is a completely normal physiological response to a highly complex trigger.
So how do people get out of that guilt trap?
The key realization, the perspective shift that provides a way out, is understanding the true source of the exhaustion. It is a realization of, I don't actually hate my name, and I don't necessarily hate this present moment. I am burdened by the sheer amount of time I spent being called this name while in a state of fear.
I am burdened by the time. That is incredibly powerful. It completely removes the blame from the individual.
It does.
It acknowledges that the shudder isn't about being ungrateful today. It's about the accumulated exhaustion of the past decades. You aren't reacting to the tea being offered. You're reacting to the thousands of times the name was used as a weapon.
It separates the current interaction from the historical conditioning. And when you understand just how heavy that historical conditioning is, it leads directly into why so many people harbor a deep, long-lasting desire to legally change their names.
Because a legal name change is a massive, exhausting undertaking.
Oh, it's a huge deal.
We aren't talking about trying out a new haircut. It's expensive legal fees, court dates, background checks, and the logistical nightmare of notifying banks, passports, credit cards, and employers. People don't do that on a whim.
No, they do it because it is far more than a superficial makeover. It is a profound structural wish to disconnect from that exact family narrative we just outlined.
To just cut the cord.
Yes, it is a desperate desire to stop being treated as the old me. When a name is entirely saturated with past trauma, changing it legally is a way to finally take ownership of your own life. It is drawing a definitive legal line in the sand between the past and the future.
But what if you can't change your name? Or what if you just don't want to go through the massive legal hassle, but you still desperately want relief from that heavy container?
Right, the practical side.
Exactly. That brings us to the core mission of what we are doing today. I want to shift into the cognitive decoupling exercises. How do we actually sit down and separate the label from our actual self-worth?
The first step in decoupling is recognizing the subconscious traps we fall into. Specifically, the danger of linking the name to personal capability.
Let's explore that, because I think this happens so subtly we don't even realize it. If you were constantly scolded, shamed, or made to feel small while being called your name, your brain doesn't just associate the name with the parent.
No, it doesn't.
It associates the name with the shame.
Exactly. Your brain forms a very toxic subconscious belief. It says, I am called John. Whenever I am called John, I am being told I am a failure. Therefore, the entity known as John is inherently flawed. John is someone who messes up.
So the name becomes the flaw.
The name becomes completely synonymous with negative self-worth.
So every time you introduce yourself, like at a job interview, on a first date, at a networking event, you say, "Hi, I'm John." But subconsciously, your nervous system feels like you are handing them a business card that says, "Hi, I'm a massive disappointment."
Yes, you are introducing yourself as the trauma.
Which is why the first step to freedom is proving to your own brain that a name has absolutely no power to dictate your ability. And the source material gave a very concrete physical exercise that helps the brain visually separate these two tangled concepts.
I love this exercise.
I do too. I came across this in the research, and I absolutely love how practical it is. It's a pen and paper method.
Yeah.
You literally sit down, take a blank piece of paper, and draw a solid line right down the middle.
Right.
On the left side, you write your name, just the letters, the specific word that causes you distress.
Yeah.
Then on the right side of the line, you write down your current evaluations, your actual present-day abilities, and your core values.
The physicality of writing it out is crucial. You're forcing the brain to look at the data.
Right. So on the left side, it just says John Smith. But on the right side, you start listing the truth of who you are today. I am a fantastic cook. I am deeply empathetic toward my friends. I survived a chaotic, difficult childhood. I'm a dedicated employee. I love astronomy.
And by physically putting it on paper, side by side, you force the brain to visually and logically separate the label from the person's actual tangible worth. You are proving to yourself that the arbitrary arrangement of letters on the left side of the line does not define, limit, or intersect with the rich, complex reality on the right side of the line.
It reminds me of untangling cords behind a television.
Oh, that's a good one.
You know when you move an entertainment center and you look behind the TV and it's just this massive, dusty, impossible knot of black wires?
And you just want to cut them all with scissors.
Right. For years, your name cord and your self-worth cord have been melted together into one giant knot in your brain. When someone pulls the name cord, the self-worth cord yanks hard and your self-esteem unplugs. This paper exercise is like sitting down on the floor and carefully, deliberately tracing the wires, peeling them apart. You finally realize that the name cord has absolutely zero electrical connection to the self-worth cord.
You are meticulously untangling the hardware of your identity. But it's important to note that as you untangle those deeply embedded cords, you are going to encounter some serious resistance.
From where?
Specifically, the phenomenon of the past self flaring up during this process.
The past self. You mean the version of us that was actually in the room experiencing the trauma when the name was being weaponized against us?
Exactly.
The angry teenager slamming doors? Or the lonely defensive kid hiding in their room?
When you start doing this kind of introspective decoupling, those past versions of you often rush to the surface, and the immediate instinct for almost everyone is absolute rejection.
Like pushing them away.
Right. You look at that angry teenager or that scared kid and you think, I hate that version of me. They were so weak, they were so defensive and cringeworthy. I need to push them away and erase them so I can just be the healed adult.
Which makes sense on a surface level. If that kid represents the pain associated with the name, wouldn't erasing the source of the pain make the name feel better? Just delete the bad code, right?
It seems logical, but psychologically, fighting the memory actually grants it more power.
How so?
Well, the past self is part of your historical reality. If you go to war with a memory, you are keeping your nervous system in a state of conflict. The breakthrough comes from the psychology of radical acceptance.
Radical acceptance.
Yes. You have to understand that your past self was not weak or flawed. They were simply using the absolute best tools they had available to survive a difficult environment at that specific time.
So the anger, the defensiveness, the hiding, the silence, those weren't embarrassing character flaws. Those were highly effective survival tactics for a child in a chaotic ecosystem.
Exactly. When you acknowledge that, you completely change your relationship with your past. Instead of
Yeah.
fighting that scared kid, you mentally say, "Thank you, that was how I survived then, you kept us alive.
Wrong.
But my situation is different now. I am safe now, and I have new tools."
Huh.
You create a psychological firewall between your past reactions and your present identity.
That was then, this is now. Sound like a bumper sticker? But when your nervous system is hijacked, having that firewall built and ready is everything.
It's essential.
But let's get into the messy reality of everyday life. We've untangled the cords on paper. We've made peace with the past self. But what happens on a random Tuesday morning when you're at a crowded airport? Someone unexpectedly shouts a name that sounds just like yours, and that distress hits you out of nowhere.
That immediate visceral trigger is where we have to employ micro-actions.
Micro-actions, okay.
When the trigger hits, the instinct is usually a blanket feeling of total panic. It's a massive, overwhelming tsunami of, I hate this, I feel sick, I need to escape right now. The strategy is to urgently deconstruct that wave.
We have to break the tsunami down into manageable drops of water.
Beautifully said, yes. Instead of just accepting the blanket statement of I feel terrible, you force your prefrontal cortex online by notice your physical body. Did your shoulders just jump to your ears? Notice your thoughts. Did you feel a sudden, irrational sense of being physically controlled by an authority figure? Did you immediately start sweating about public perception and strangers judging you?
So instead of drowning in a vague tsunami of panic, you turn it into a highly specific checklist. Because a tsunami is unmanageable. You can't fight a wave. But a checklist of small physical symptoms that removes the existential dread and allows you to apply targeted coping mechanisms.
Let's say your name gets called over a loudspeaker and you do the rapid checklist. You check in with your body and realize, okay, my shoulders aren't actually tight. I don't feel controlled by my parents right now, but my heart is racing at 100 beats a minute because I feel like everyone in this room is staring at me.
Oh, yeah.
Suddenly you realize the problem in this exact moment isn't actually your childhood trauma.
The problem is just acute public exposure anxiety.
Precisely. If you isolate the components, you can tackle the specific anxiety completely separately from the trauma of the name. If it's just social anxiety, you can do a quick 4-7-8 breathing exercise to lower your heart rate.
Right.
You don't have to spiral into a deep existential crisis about your family history. It is a highly effective way to regain control and stop the mental spiral before it starts.
It keeps you anchored in the present tense. I love that. But what if we want to bypass the heavy lifting of that spiral entirely, at least in certain areas of our lives? This brings us to a strategy that I think is incredibly joyful and empowering, the adoption of chosen names.
Oh, this is one of my favorite parts of the process. If the given name is just too heavily burdened for everyday use, building a new relationship with a completely new label is a profound exercise in psychological freedom.
And the beauty of this is that it doesn't require a judge or a legal document. We're talking about claiming online handles, pen names, or just a fun nickname you give the barista at a coffee shop, or the name you use when you join a local running club.
This connects directly to the core human need for agency.
Agency?
Yes. Think about the fundamental nature of a birth name. When we are born, our names are thrust upon us. We have zero input. The name is a mandatory assignment given by the very people who may have later caused the trauma.
It's like a mandatory uniform you are forced to wear. And for some people, that uniform is itchy, uncomfortable, and reminds them of a prison.
But choosing a new handle or nickname shifts that power dynamic instantly. It moves your brain from the passive state of a name is something assigned to me by authority figures to the active state of a name is a tool that I control and deploy.
And the absolute best part about this, and this is so important to highlight, is that you don't even have to find a name that you are deeply, madly, poetically in love with.
Right, no pressure.
Exactly. There is no pressure to find your true soul name. The only criteria for a chosen handle is that it doesn't make you flinch, and that you chose it.
Lowering that barrier to entry is crucial. You aren't looking for perfection, you're just looking for neutrality and personal agency.
It is about building a fresh, completely untainted database of safe memories. Let's say you join a Tuesday night pottery class, and you introduce yourself with the nickname you just picked. Every single week, you go in, you get your hands dirty, you laugh with people, and they call you by that nickname.
Mm-hmm.
Every time they say it and you feel relaxed and happy, you are dropping a shiny new positive memory into a brand new container. You are quite literally building a safe word for yourself.
Neurologically, you are rewiring the conditioned response. Instead of the old equation where name equals danger and scolding, the new equation becomes chosen name equals safety, creativity, autonomy, and Tuesday night pottery.
It's beautiful. It really is. But of course, we still live in the real world. Most of us still have to use our given legal names on our taxes, at the dentist, and when we sign a lease. So what does all of this mean for the name we were given at birth? How do we ultimately coexist with it?
Right, we have to deal with reality.
Yeah. And this brings us to what I think is the most liberating countercultural reframe we've discussed today.
It pushes back against a lot of modern pop psychology, that's for sure. The ultimate realization is this: you do not have to make it your goal to love your given name.
We really need to let that sink in
Mm-hmm.
because we live in a culture that is absolutely obsessed with the aesthetics of total healing.
Mm.
There is this immense toxic positivity pressure that says if you have trauma, you have to do the work, go to therapy, and process it until you actively love the thing that hurt you.
Oh, yes. Love your scars, love your past.
Right. Embrace your inner child, love your given name. But the reality is, you don't have to do that.
Forcing yourself to love a name that causes physiological pain is not just unrealistic, it's actively counterproductive. It becomes a trap.
How does it become a trap?
It just leads to profound feelings of failure and self-blame. A person will think, I've been going to therapy for 3 years, I've done all the cognitive paper exercises, but I still cringe when the dentist calls my legal name. I must be broken. I haven't healed correctly.
It just becomes another stick to beat yourself with. Another way to tell yourself you're failing.
Exactly. The healthiest, most realistic goal is not love. It is simply neutrality.
Neutrality.
Reaching a baseline point where the name no longer controls your actions, spikes your heart rate, or dictates your self-worth. You don't have to fall in love with the heavy lead container. You just need to realize that you are strong enough to put it down in the corner of the room, and you don't have to carry it everywhere you go.
So how do we achieve that glorious neutrality? If we pull our focus away from trying to fix our relationship with the name, where do we direct that energy?
We direct it toward building the outer shell of our actual identity. Instead of agonizing over the question, who am I, is this name? We shift our daily reflections entirely to our actions and our output in the world.
Actions instead of labels.
We focus on tangible questions. What did I create today? What new skill did I learn? How did I take responsibility and fix a mistake I made this afternoon?
The things you actually do.
Yes. These are verifiable, undeniable truths about your character, and they have absolutely nothing to do with the syllables people use to get your attention.
I want to challenge everyone listening to think about this tonight. Look at your own internal monologue or your journal entries. Are you tying your successes and failures to your core identity?
That's a great question to ask.
Right. Are you saying, I am a bad person because I messed up that presentation? Tying the failure directly back to the name on your birth certificate? Or are you tying it to your actions? I made a bad choice, I was unprepared, but I learned from it, and I'll do better tomorrow.
Because one narrative reinforces the heavy, toxic container, and the other builds an unbreakable outer shell of self-reliance.
If we synthesize everything we've explored today, connecting the neurology, the trauma, and the exercises back to everyday life, the fundamental truth we arrive at is this. A human being is not made of a name. They are constructed entirely of daily choices, values, and lived experiences.
The name is just the neon sticky note on the outside of the box. It doesn't dictate what's inside.
And as you move through life, stacking up your choices, your creations, the ways you love people, and the boundaries you set, the name shrinks in importance.
It loses its gravity.
Yeah, it becomes just a tiny, irrelevant label on a massive, highly complex piece of art.
A tiny label on a massive piece of art. That's a great image.
Think about standing in the Louvre, looking at the Mona Lisa. You aren't obsessing over the little brass plaque screwed into the bottom of the frame. You don't care about the font on the plaque.
No, of course not.
You are entirely captivated by the painting itself. The canvas, the colors, the brushstrokes. We need to focus all of our energy on painting the canvas of our lives with our actions and let the name just be a piece of metal on the frame.
The label doesn't paint the picture.
Yeah.
You do.
Which brings me to a final thought I want to leave everyone with today. Something to mull over as you go about your week, building on this idea of actions over labels. If our true identity is built entirely from our daily choices, our creations, and our values, rather than the name we were handed at birth, Then when we walk up to someone new, shake their hand and introduce ourselves, are we really telling them who we are? Or are we just handing them a blank file folder with a sticky note on it that we both get to fill from scratch? Until next time, keep diving deep.